So thank you very much to the IET for hosting RedR tonight. I've been part of RedR since really 2003 when I started coming to the AGM as a cool thing to do as an undergraduate student. And I was on the staff for a few years and have been on the board for a few years. I have to say that I think the importance of RedR in the sector is really clear in terms of capabilities, the capabilities it's building. And a lot of what I'm talking about tonight is about new types of capabilities that are emerging around the world. I'm a little bit nervous about what I'm going to say because there are people in this room who have spent their entire careers working in humanitarian logistics and improving humanitarian logistics. And what I'm suggesting is that the way humanitarian logistics works at the moment is completely unsustainable and needs to change and needs to transform. And you know, the idea of sustainability in the humanitarian sector, when you think about first principles, might be a bit of a bit of a nonsense. Like you don't want to kind of keep sustaining disasters and whatever. So I'm interpreting it more as about how can you encourage sustainability through humanitarian action. And I think that's really what I want to talk about from a financial perspective. I was in Copenhagen last week looking at the archetype of a humanitarian logistics system, the UNICEF supply chain, the UNICEF supply division. Absolutely incredible facilities they have. And let me show you some photos. Copenhagen is a very expensive city, in case you don't know. This thing is enormous. This thing is enormous.
Given by the Danish government.
Given by the royal family, I believe. Yeah, the Danish government. Now, when I say enormous, what I'm getting at is, you know that scene at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark? And basically what's happening in this facility is that they are taking in supplies that come from different factories like National Relief Supplies in Pakistan. So a pallet of buckets arrives, and then they come in one side of the building, and then these robots move the buckets around, and then people take the buckets out of the boxes and put them into other boxes, and then put bits of soap and toothpaste and whatever to make a hygiene kit. And that hygiene kit then goes on the shelf, and then when someone needs it, it gets deployed. It's extraordinary. And this is kind of, I would say, that this is what, from 200 years on from the Industrial Revolution, this is what a modern supply chain might look like. And there's even more advanced systems than this. In the Ethiopian famine, which is a bit of a strange thing to be talking about whilst there's a food distribution going on, in canapes this evening, the aid sector learned that dumping subsidised grain onto local markets put local farmers out of business and extended the crisis. It actually, rather than sustaining the solution to the crisis, it sustained the crisis itself. It extended the famine. Now, I'm potentially exaggerating that a little bit, but lessons were learned that what you have to be able to do is support local markets and support local agriculture, rather than bringing in supplies and dumping them on local markets and potentially depressing local markets. Now, after Cyclone Winston in Fiji, I spent the last couple of years in the Pacific region. Ooh, can you see that? Fairly, the archetype of the aid industry, I suppose, the Oxfam bucket. It's actually built into the Field Ready logo, to the logo of my organisation. That bucket, which is made by, the third version anyway, is made in Pakistan. Was shipped to Copenhagen, or if it's Oxfam, to Bicester. And then was shipped via Dubai and Bangkok to the north of Fiji, when it was trucked around to the south of Fiji to where the warehouse is in Suva, and then it was trucked background to the north of Fiji, where the distribution was, because that was the affected area of Cyclone Winston. Nobody really knows how much the supply chain cost, because of all of the different ways that delivery works in that system. What I can tell you is that 1 kilometre away from the Oxfam office in Suva, where all the buckets were going to the warehouse, they've been shipped around the world, 1 kilometre away on a trading estate there is a bucket making factory. I've spoken to businesses in Vanuatu, or previous business owners in Vanuatu, who have, after Cyclone Pam, their factory was damaged, but they went out of business because of the influx of free soap. They were making soap in their factory day in, day out. Cyclone Pam came along, the aid sector turned up, dumped finished products onto the local market, and put the local manufacturers out of business, decreased their resilience and sustainability, increased their dependence on aid. It sustained the humanitarian sector. It didn't sustain the livelihoods and the jobs and the economics of the local people. So, new ways of doing things. One of the things Field Ready is known for is introducing manufacturing into the field. So we hire local people, and they might go into a clinic in the Himalayas in Sindhupalchak district after the earthquake, find a broken oxygen connector in a clinic on its suction pump, a very important machine to provide maternity services in clinics. $500 machine, a bit of plastic has snapped, 40-cent piece of plastic, machine's useless, you can't use it to suck anymore, and that's the point of a suction pump. So, trying to get spare parts for that, good luck. You have to replace the machine, and that's what aid agencies do. So they replace, for the want of a 40-cent piece of plastic, they replace a $500 machine. And that's what the Medical Supplies Division of the Ministry of Health in Nepal would do as well. Often because they have second-hand equipment that, they can't get spare parts for. Ram, who used to be our apprentice in Nepal, we hired him after the earthquakes, now owns a business that travels around the Himalayas with a 3D printer fixing medical devices. It's become his livelihood. It's become his economic opportunity, and several other organizations in Nepal. Now, 3D printing lends itself to spare parts, right? What you can also do is, with 3D printing, you can make a mold for a cook stove burner to improve the efficiency of cook stoves, and use a traditional sand casting, metal casting technique. One 3D print, you can make a mold that can do mass production using local technologies, traditional technologies that go back 1,000 years, to make more and more cook stove burners. This guy, Mr. KC, Madhukar KC, illiterate, doesn't speak English. He heard there was a new kind of machine in Nepal after the earthquake. He approached Field Ready and said, I've spent 15 years iterating new types of cook stove burner because I am sick to death of breathing in smoke every time I want to eat in my home. The design got so complicated, he couldn't go into production because he couldn't make the burner, and it was costing him too much money to go to India to get the thing machined to bring back, but he wanted to make a business out of it. We took a Ram, in fact, when he was our apprentice, took a 3D model of it, made a 3D model of it. We printed one out. Now he has an order for 220,000 cook stoves. He's employing about 25 people installing cook stoves all over the country. He is one of the few, that we helped him do this, he is one of the few Nepali patent holders in Nepal. There are about 12. Livelihoods created by making things locally. Now, I gave some examples of spare parts. What we're also doing in Iraq, and this is something I think RedR has big potential for in the future, training local entrepreneurs. We've built a couple of maker spaces. So introducing into Mosul after ISIS has left, and into Erbil. A couple of maker spaces which are facilities that have 3D printers, laser cutters, digital fabrication, and we teach people how to run businesses and to use these machines so that they can be the ones that do the work, that win the contracts to make the things that people need locally. And these are photos from last week. We were running these workshops day in, day out, supported by GIZ. Skills development, modeling houses, showing construction workers when they were rebuilding after the earthquake the value of through stones and things. This is a physical model where if you pull the through stones out, the house will just fall down. It's a very visual way of training people. But the thing I really want to kind of get at, and to show you kind of my anger at the way things work, and that's fundamentally, I'm in the aid sector, I'm motivated from a place of anger. Just, why does it work like this? Like, it shouldn't be like this, it should be better. This is a bit of wood with a tape measure on it. And this is a standard aid item used all over the world, distributed all over the world to measure the height of children. Bit of wood with a tape measure on it. And it's very heavy. Kids hate it because it looks like a bit of a torture device. And what's happening is, and you know, I know this is going to go on the internet, but I think my friends at UNICEF will forgive me for saying this. The new RFP for that suggested that this should be adapted to include a digital readout to give a more accurate number of the height of a child, rather than training people to, read a tape measure. Which means it won't be able to be made locally. And you can just imagine a committee getting together somewhere and saying, how do we improve this thing? And rather the mentality of, how can we shift economic sustainability to make it possible for other people to make, they made it more complicated and took it out of the hands of being able to make it, the potential for local people to manufacture it. It's a bit of wood with a tape measure on it. We should be able to make it anywhere. It's $250 for a pair, 6 weeks delivery time to Kathmandu. So says the nutrition lead there. So, if you go into the UNICEF warehouse, you'll see all these products. Field Ready is basically in the process of trying to figure out how we make soap, how we make buckets, how we make potties, how we make collapsible jerry cans, how we make lanterns, how we make all of that locally. And we make these kits locally. And one of the ways we're doing that is, I'm very proud to say, I've recently purchased a 4-ton block of steel, which is a mold for an Oxfam bucket. So what we're doing is moving this mold around the world and attaching it to local factories so that we can make the Oxfam bucket when and where it's needed. And now UNICEF in Fiji is contracting the local bucket making factory to make the product that meets their specification. We're trying to meet these aid agencies halfway. If we can manufacture locally, it's often cheaper, better, faster because the cost of supply chains is so high. And that cost of the supply chain is the margin that local entrepreneurs can play with. If it's cheaper, you can help more people. If it's faster, you help people more quickly. If it's better, it supports economic sustainability by making it locally. That's the idea I wanted to put forward in terms of sustainability in humanitarian action. Thank you very much for listening.